Okay, we are going to work through some equation solving when it involves the distributive property. Okay, let's do a little review of the distributive property. Don't forget, this is the property when you have your expression and as we follow the order of operations. If you can't do anything inside of your grouping symbols, you have no exponents, then we look at multiplication. And this 3 outside is actually being multiplied by the 2x and multiplied by 9. And so we end up with this expression simplifying to 6x plus 27. So now we're going to be looking at some equations where you'll have to distribute a number in order to get everything simplified in preparation to solve. So let's quick run through some steps simplifying each side. So distributive property is going to be something that we definitely do when we're simplifying each side. Okay, so that gets handled in this section, as well as the additive inverse, doing our add the opposite, any combining like terms, anything like that happens during the simplify step. Remember, our goal is to isolate the variable, get that variable by itself. Then we undo addition, undo multiplication, and check our solution. All right, so let's just go straight to an example. Copy the example down, and then we'll go ahead and solve it. So remember, first step is to simplify. We're looking for subtraction that we can change into addition, any combining like terms, distributing. We're basically going to simplify each side using the order of operations. So again, we're going to imagine this left-hand side, forget that there's even an equal sign and with an equation. We're just going to focus on the left-hand side and simplify it as if it's an expression. I have no subtraction. I have a negative here, but there's nothing wrong with a negative. I want to make sure I have subtraction, and I do. I cannot add what's inside my parentheses. I don't have any exponents. Now I look for multiplication. Oops. This negative 2 is what's getting distributed to the x and to the 1. So negative 2 times x is negative 2x. Bring down my addition sign. Negative 2 times 1 is negative 2. Now I can copy down the rest of my equation. And if we look on the left-hand side, there's nothing left to do. I can't combine. There's nothing left to multiply. Everything is simplified. So from here, I can just start solving my equation. Okay, so we've gone through the simplify step. Now we just need to remember the goal is to find out what x equals. So ultimately, my goal is to find x equals some number, right? So in order to do that, I've got to isolate this variable. So this x needs to end up by itself. So in order to do that, first thing we do is undo our addition. So negative 2 is being added to my variable. To undo addition, we're going to use the opposite. We're going to add the opposite to each side. I need this. If I can make negative 2 become 0, I get negative 2x plus 0 equals some number. In order to make this negative 2 become 0, I have to add 2 to both sides. If I add 2 to both sides, my 2 and negative 2 cancel, and I get 0. Some may feel the need to write that 0 down, some may not. You may be comfortable just canceling here and writing negative 2x. And then on the right-hand side, negative 8 plus positive 2. If I have different signs, I find the difference of the digits. The difference between 8 and 2 is 6. I have more negatives, so my answer is negative. Then I want to undo my multiplication. I have a negative 2 being multiplied. If I imagine this as a fraction, I can actually multiply each side by the reciprocal. And what will happen is, remember when we undo multiplication, we're trying to make this coefficient become 1. A number times its reciprocal is 1. So what will happen is my 2's cancel, my 1's cancel. A negative times a negative is a positive, so I'm left with just x. On the right-hand side, when I multiply across, 6 times 1 is 6. 1 times 2 is 2, so I get 6 over 2. Remember, I have a negative times a negative, and a negative times a negative is a positive. I'm actually going to get a little more room here. So again, we have 6 over 2. I have a negative times a negative, which equals a positive. You do want to simplify your fractions if you ever get one. So if I divide each by 2, my answer is x equals 3. So to check this, I just substitute. Instead of an x, I have a 3. And let's see, does it equal negative 8? Well, now I can follow the order of operations. Add my 3 plus my 4. Negative 2 times 4 is negative 8, and that checks out. Let's look at another one. The process is still the same, even though my variable is on the right-hand side. First thing I do is I still simplify each side. Look for a subtraction to undo. I don't have any. So now I can follow my order of operations. I can't do anything inside my grouping symbol here. I have no exponents. So now I have this negative 4 to distribute inside. So we'll copy our negative 20. Remember, we're not doing anything to the left. We're just focusing on simplifying this expression on the right. Negative 4 times 2x is negative 8x. Remember, we multiply our numbers. Negative 4 times positive 2 is negative 8. Negative 4 times 5 is negative 20. So at this point, there's nothing left to simplify. I can't combine like terms. I can't do anything else on this right-hand side. So I can start remembering our goal is to get the variable isolated, get the x by itself. Okay, remember, eventually we want to have something equaling x. So now we want to undo addition is our next step. So adding negative 20, that needs to disappear because I want negative 8x plus 0. Remember, adding 0 to anything keeps that number itself, that identity property. Any number plus 0 equals itself. So I need the number being added to become 0. Well, if I have negative 20, positive 20 combined with negative 20 is 0. Now what's going to happen is something you may possibly see. So I wanted to make sure that you had an example with this just in case. Don't get nervous. Trust your math, because what you'll see is I have negative 20 plus positive 20 equals 0. My negative 8x comes down. Negative 20 plus positive 20 is also 0. So just keep going with this. Still solving our equation. We undo addition or undo multiplication next. Remember, I want negative 8 to become 1 because 1x equals x, right? Oops. So again, in order to undo our multiplication, I'll turn my coefficient into a fraction. Then I'm going to multiply each side by the reciprocal. Now on the right-hand side, my -8s, my 1s all cancel, and I'm left with x. And on the left, what's anything times 0? You got it, 0. It's okay to have your answer be 0. It is absolutely possible for x to equal 0 or your variable to equal 0. There's nothing wrong with that. Let's check it. Remember, I'm just going to substitute my x for 0. Follow the order of operations. Inside my parentheses first, 2 times 0 is 0. 0 plus 5 is 5. -4 times 5 is -20. And that checks out. All right, example 3. We'll go a little faster. Oops. All right, first step is to simplify. I actually have a subtraction sign right here that we're going to need to fix. So we'll do our add the opposite. Remember, our negatives are not a problem. It's this subtraction that I need to change to addition. If subtraction becomes addition, the next number becomes the opposite. Okay, let me make sure that's a little more clear. All right, so now I can continue to simplify. I can't do anything in my parentheses. I have no exponents. So now I have this -3 out here that I need to distribute inside. Be very careful when you're multiplying here. Don't forget that it's a negative that we're multiplying. -3 times -5x is 15x. -3 times -1 is +3. And then from here, we have a two-step equation that you've probably done tons of already. So you should be getting the hang of this for sure. I need to undo my addition next. So I have a +3, which means I need to add -3 to both sides. You could also think of this as subtracting 3. The only problem is, let's take a look at the right side in a second here. I have 15x, +3 and -3 cancel. Be very careful when you have these a bunch of negatives and you're thinking subtraction. Remember, it's very tricky when I have a negative and I'm trying to subtract from that. So if you got anything other than -30 when you thought about this, you need to review what's happening on this side. If you think of this as -27 minus 3, if I have 27 negatives, how can I take 3 positives away from that? It makes no sense. Our brains can't make sense of that. But if you look at this, think about subtracting a number is the same as adding its opposite. So subtracting 3 is the same as adding -3. So if I look at this as 27 negatives plus 3 negatives, so -27 plus -3, it's a lot easier to realize your answer is -30. So please be careful. This is the kind of part of a problem where you've done all the complicated work and then you make an arithmetic error. Please be very careful. That's why you'll hear me say add -3 to both sides. So now I've got my multiplication I need to undo. Remember, we undo multiplication by multiplying by the reciprocal on each side. On my left side, everything cancels and I get x. On the right-hand side, I have a negative times a positive, so my answer will be negative. I'm actually going to cross simplify here. Divide each of these by 15. I end up getting 2 and 1, so I end up with -2 as my answer. If you're not a big fan of cross simplifying, you could have multiplied across and got negative 30 over 15, and then divided each by 15. You still get the same answer, just a little less work. Check our answer. I'm actually going to do the additive inverse right there. So simplify inside our parentheses first. I get 10 plus negative 1. 10 plus negative 1 is 9. Negative 3 times 9 is negative 27, and that checks out. Last example, it's actually example 4. Start by simplifying my right-hand side here. Following the order of operations. Remember, when we simplify, we go through the order of operations. Can't do anything in the grouping symbols. No exponents. So the next thing is multiplication, which is where the distributive property comes in. I get 4 times 3x is 12x. 4 times 1 is 4. Nothing left to simplify. So now I have a simple two-step equation. Undo our addition next. If I have positive 4, I need that to become 0. So I add a negative 4. 16 plus negative 4 is 12. Bring my 12x down. Remember, I didn't do anything to the 12x yet. 4 minus 4 or 4 plus negative 4 is 0. Now 12 is my coefficient. We want our coefficient to become 1 by undoing the multiplication. Look at that as a fraction and multiply each side by the reciprocal. If you look, my 12s cancel here and I'm left with x. On the left-hand side, my 12s also cancel and I'm left with 1. Don't let this make you nervous either. People will look at this and think the answer is 0. Think about it for a second. On the right-hand side, these are canceling and becoming 1. Remember, there's always a 1 here you just can't see. When numbers cancel in fractions, they become 1, which is what we want for this right-hand side. It just so happens that it happens on the left as well. And again, if you don't like cross-simplifying, you could have multiplied across and got 12 over 12, which simplifies to 1. So our answer is 1x. Our answer is x equals 1. Let's check it. So we substitute our x with a 1. Then I follow the order of operations. Inside my grouping symbols, I multiply first. Then I add. 4 times 4 is 16, and that checks out. And that's it.